Thanks everyone for joining us. It's a stormy day in Cape Town, but I'm hoping that Lyndsey and I can put some color in the day at least. I see there are lots of Cinderellas and only a few of us that are not particularly interested in Black Friday. I'm really keen to see what is going to happen with Black Friday this year with social distancing and all of the effects of 2020. But yeah, let's see what happens there. So firstly, my 3 words, and this is not my address, these are my 3 words, are puzzle, chameleon, and kitchen. Now, at the office, we use 3 words, or this concept and notion of being able to uniquely describe something in 3 words for a whole host of things. One of them is to describe ourselves, like I just did. It's in fact a fantastic icebreaker. If you ever needed one, I can tell you all about that. Secondly, we use it to define and cement our strategies. And then thirdly, we use it often for prioritization. I mean, there are many other examples where we use this. You can see triangles up everywhere. In fact, I personally am so fond of 3 words that we created an entire framework that we call the power of 3, of which what3words had a really big inspirational part to play in that. So I'm really chuffed to have Lyndsey here today. I Facebook stalked her and then gave her a surprise meeting invite a few weeks ago to say I need to chat to you because I just think this concept of the 3 words is really brilliant, and I'll leave that all up to her to tell you about if you don't know this incredible app already. But our topic for today in broad terms is around logistics. Now, as you will know, in the e-commerce and online shopping space, this is absolutely crucial. It's a critical part of our customer experience. And I would venture far enough to say probably the most contentious part of the customer experience. If you're like me, for example, if I think about logistics or deliveries for online shopping, I don't want to pay for it. I don't want to pay for my deliveries. It's a bit like paying for parking at the shopping center. I don't like it. I don't want to pay. I'll be the one that buys an extra 2 or 3 items to get the free delivery. It obviously has to work. It has to be timeous and it has to be reliable. No one wants their post-COVID wine order to arrive in bits and pieces. Now, I'm by no means a logistics expert. Lyndsey is the one that will take you through all of the fun things about logistics. But I will relay this to an example, and it's fresh in my memory. That's why I'll use it. I've just returned back home from a couple of days on the golf course with my husband. So we were up in the garden route, absolutely beautiful part of the country. Please support local tourism. We need to support our tourism friends, but we had a fantastic 3 days on the golf course. Now, I don't know how many of you are golfers. I did see at least a couple on the list. But if you're not a golfer, you can relate this to tennis, to cricket, to rugby, to bowls, Andre, any kind of sport. I think this analogy can be related to. Now, a good day on the golf course is not defined by the number of brilliant shots you play. It is, however, by the consistently good shots you play. And I think consistency here is the main thing. A fantastic drive will not guarantee you a birdie. Okay? It is a series of shots that get you there. And for me, the online shopping experience is exactly the same. You could have a fantastic checkout, but if the delivery is bad, the experience is bad. So how do we create an experience that is consistently good? But when we all strive for something fantastic, that fantastic drive followed by a good approach and a good putt, that will get you your birdie. So this is a team sport if you're in the online shopping space. I think it's so important for us to have an intimate understanding of logistics. And then also supply chain, so the customer. So if you understand the guy in front of you and the guy behind you, and if you can support where they potentially have a bad shot by giving a brilliant shot in return, ultimately we will do a fantastic customer experience. Now, speaking about fantastic, we've got a fantastic lady who's joining us today. Lyndsey, thank you so much for taking the time to spend with us. I know you are incredibly passionate about your topic, about logistics and about geography, I understand. I'd also see that you've spent a lot of time in the UK, including places like the Palace, which you can tell us about if people are interested. And then Mail and Guardian voted Lyndsey one of the top 200 young South Africans this year. So we are incredibly grateful to have you here today and for you to give us some tips around what to do around logistics for Black Friday and for online shopping businesses going forward, because I think that is something that will be positive post 2020 COVID, is the increase and the huge incredible momentum we have on online shopping. So logistics is one of the big ones that will define whether or not we can make a success. So Lyndsey, all over to you.
Annalie, thank you so much. It's wonderful to be with you today. Thank you to the entire team for setting this excellent session up. I'm really excited to be talking to everybody about how what3words optimizes logistics, particularly in that critical last mile, which we've seen has only become more important actually throughout 2020 as we've all experienced an increase in e-commerce throughout this lockdown that we've been facing. But I wanted to sort of start by taking everybody through what3words as a concept, just in case somebody hasn't heard of it before, which is totally fine. But this is probably one of my favorite things to talk about. what3words exists as a business because traditional addresses as we know them simply aren't fit for purpose in the 21st century. what3words is a global addressing system, and we have basically come up with a new way of thinking about addresses that gives everyone across the world an address with 3 unique words, because actually large swathes of the world don't actually have an address, full stop. They either have no address at all or they have an inadequate address, and that makes things really difficult on just an everyday basis for a lot of people. But it actually also means that in terms of accessing new markets for retailers, things become very, very difficult in terms of putting an address into a checkout field. So that's what we've been working on over the last few years here in South Africa and actually around the world as a business, is to talk about the potential of optimizing that flow, that last mile. As you were saying, Hanali, I love the analogy of you can have a cracking drive down the golf hole, but actually you need to finish well. And that customer experience is so critical, and there's so many parts to the online shopping experience that need to be optimized and to really be made the best that they can be, so that that customer at the end of the day is really happy. But fundamentally, we exist as a business because of cases like this. This is a particular point on a map just outside of Durban, actually, here in South Africa, in a place called Kwandingezi. And this is what you would see if you were looking at a particular GPS coordinate on map view on Google Maps. You would see a lot of gray space, 1 or 2 roads maybe. But if you were to switch to satellite view, this is the community that's living there. Thousands of people who have no way of talking about where they live, simply because there is no addressing infrastructure. There are no streets and thus no street names. And this is actually a hugely limiting factor to socioeconomic prosperity. And this is why what3words exists. These people in this community have no way of talking about where they live, which means that never mind getting their Black Friday delivery to their front door, which is pretty much an impossibility, they also actually can't do really fundamental things that make us citizens actually of South Africa. They can't register to vote without an address. They can't open a bank account. They can't get an ambulance to their front door in an emergency. You're functionally invisible to the state without an address. And we think that that is totally unacceptable in the 21st century, that there are people living, particularly in South Africa, particularly because of the legacy of apartheid spatial planning. It's completely unacceptable that people don't have an address. So we exist to try and completely remove those barriers to that economic prosperity. But we've seen that it's actually not just a problem in rural areas or informal settlements. We've seen that even brand new suburbs and housing developments that have cropped up almost overnight also struggle with addresses. And if you look closely here, this is a brand new complex of hundreds of houses in Waterfall, just north of Joburg. And if you look really closely, you'll see there's also no street names. Now, these people living in this suburb particularly are prime candidates for Black Friday customer base. These people are going to be ordering online. They're going to be getting, 50% off whatever products they're looking for. They want to get it to their door very quickly. As Hanali said, we're all very keen, especially to get our wine deliveries in before there's another lockdown potentially. So actually, how do these people talk about where they live? How do they put in an accurate address onto a checkout page to ensure that they can spend their money and that they know that their parcel is going to get to them without any delay? Another kind of challenge that we see also, and it's not just in the South African market, actually globally, for e-commerce retailers, is repeated street names and customer confusion about where they live. It sounds a little obtuse and a little strange, but we've actually seen that many people don't necessarily differentiate between 48 Joubert Street, as an example, and 48 Joubert Road. They think they're the same thing. And so they might very well put in 48 Joubert Road onto an e-commerce checkout page when actually they mean street, and that causes huge headaches for the courier partner, who then has to try and figure out where that person lives. You also have the phenomenon of repeated suburb names in South Africa. There's a number of Morningsides, there's a number of Melroses, there's a number of Rosebanks. They're in completely different cities, and you've got a hell of a problem if you can't figure out where that person lives. So this also creates inefficiency in that last mile, and it means that couriers don't know exactly where they're going, and there has to be human intervention at some point to try and assess where this address actually is in South Africa. And another kind of problem we've also seen is that Google Maps is brilliant at maps, and we love Google Maps as what3words, but Google isn't that great at addresses. And that's because it's a constant database that needs to be updated with all of these traditional addresses that are constantly added to that database. And so you also have the phenomenon then of really large sites like the CTICC in Cape Town, or a large stadium anywhere across the country, or even a giant mall that has multiple entrances and multiple entry and exit points, but actually the pin drops slap bang in the middle of the building. And that doesn't help me if I need to find the exact entrance to go to the Woolworths, or it doesn't help me if I need to find the exact parking entrance at a really large, banking complex, as an example. It makes things a bit difficult. So in that last mile, again, there's a lot of inefficiency potentially. That means that there's a lot of customer frustration. And the poor old courier doesn't actually know where he's going. He doesn't know how to access where he needs to go. So for these reasons, what3words kind of took traditional addresses and just put them to one side and thought we actually need a system that is completely different and suitable for the 21st century. So we as a business divided the whole world into a grid of 3 meter by 3 meter squares. And we gave every single square in the whole world a unique address made up of 3 dictionary words. And by dictionary words, I mean words like table, chair, spoon, happy, pear, mountain, apple, chair, banana. Words that are easy to say, easy to spell, and that most people can understand. So if I then wanted to climb up Table Mountain with my friend, instead of saying, hey, meet me by the bush, opposite the other bush, next to the other bush, I can actually just say, hey, meet me for a brilliant sunset shot at Poet Standouts Masters. And that is the only 3 by 3 meter square in the world that is called Poet Standouts Masters. So it means, in effect, that anyone can talk about anywhere very, very simply. And when I say anywhere, I really mean it. Even the oceans, the middle of Antarctica, the middle of the Brazilian rainforest, every single 3 by 3 meter square in the world has 3 words assigned to it already. You can just find out what they are. You'll be sitting in a 3 by 3 meter square as we speak. You will have a what3words address for where you are at this very minute. So I can tell you in a second how you can find that out. But functionally, all we've done is we've taken GPS coordinates and we've made them human friendly. We love GPS coordinates as what3words. They're amazing. They're super accurate. They are literally the best way to talk about location, machine to machine. It's when you introduce a human into the mix that things become really difficult with GPS coordinates. I've certainly never used a GPS coordinate on an e-commerce checkout page. I think any retailer that would implement that sort of system needs to have a bit of a sit down and a bit of a reflection about that decision. I've also certainly never said, Hanneli, I can't wait to see you for coffee at 26 degrees, 8.9351 seconds south, etc. You'd think I was actually having an episode. It's not a human-friendly way to talk about location. It's not actually a way that we can use location very easily between us to communicate. So we've basically just taken the accuracy, the incredible precision of a GPS coordinate of 16 digits and just turned it into 3 simple words. So this is our app that you can actually see here on the screen. You'll see all the little blocks and the squares that have been delineated. And actually, this is the parking entrance to Standard Bank's giant complex in Rosebank, which has 7 buildings across 2 city blocks. It's an absolute nightmare to navigate because I've done it a couple of times and there's 7 different receptions as well. And eventually I got so cross, I said to them, you need to give me your 3 words for the parking bays, please, so that I can find my way. And that happens to be Muddle Atomic Shrimps. Again, the only square in the world that is called Muddle Atomic Shrimps. And I can then navigate using the what3words app to that exact point using whatever navigation is already on my phone. So we've tried to make navigation to exact last mile points on a map as precise as possible, but also as easy as possible. Which means suddenly that giant sites, even like stadiums, suddenly have a way to talk about all the different points of interest and entry and exit points on that site really, really simply. So a giant stadium will have obviously many what3words addresses across the scope, but it actually means that from a consumer perspective, you can talk about places in a very simple way that differentiate them and delineate them. Really, really useful. You'll see obviously immediately the applications for e-commerce and potentially optimizing that last mile as well. But just to let you know, we started out the system in English, but we've actually just launched our 47th language globally. So the whole world is addressed in 47 languages and counting. We are continuously bringing new languages to bear, which means that you can find your what3words address in anything from Afrikaans, Zulu, and Xhosa here in South Africa, to Mongolian, to Arabic, to Korean. We've just launched Amharic and Ukrainian, if that's your flavor. And it means that if you wanted to, you could navigate in the middle of the Brazilian rainforest in Xhosa. It's about flexibility, it's about inclusion, it's about the right of somebody to talk about their location in their home language, which we think is absolutely critical. So how do you find your what3words address? And this is what Shani was alluding to earlier. We're going to be running a little competition. We'd love everybody on the call to find their what3words address as we speak. And once the chat option becomes available, to pop your what3words address into the chat box. You'll see that your house will have multiple 3-word addresses probably for it. Choose the best words, the funniest words, the most interesting and engaging words, pop them into the chat box, and we can pick a winner at the end. And you can do that by downloading the what3words app, and it's free to download on the App Store or the Google Play Store. You can then see where you are. You can type in your traditional address, switch to satellite view, move the map to find it, or you can go to what3words.com, follow the prompts, and we will help you find your what3words address. You will see that every single square is completely different to the square next to it. And we've done that on purpose to enhance last mile accuracy as well for courier drivers, because we don't want to be like traditional addresses, where if I was to say, Hanali, please meet me for a coffee at 50 Adderley Street, Hanali might say, did you mean 1515 or 5050? Even that level of inefficiency and friction is unacceptable to us. So every single what3words address is completely different to the ones around it, so that you almost like have inbuilt error detection. So please find your what3words address, and when the chat box opens, pop them into the chat and we will pick a winner for best what3words address. But what I wanted to say as well is we've put these similar addresses very, very, very far apart on purpose. And again, like I was saying, we want to remove any inefficiency in that last mile. So somebody, if they wanted to look for table chair lamp, but actually typed in table chair lamps with an S by mistake, would see immediately that they've typed in the wrong address, simply because it's so far apart. It's inbuilt error detection. And we find that that's really important as well for consumers inputting a what3words address onto an e-commerce checkout page, because it allows them to be hyper accurate and to know immediately if they've made a mistake or possibly a typo. And if they do make a typo, we also have something built into the system called auto suggest. So this is really similar to when you type in a search into Google and you maybe make a spelling error, or you type something incorrectly and it'll say, did you mean XYZ? That's very similar to, it was actually originally called the what3words did you mean feature. So we have something called auto suggest, which corrects any typos, any words that don't actually exist in the system, and it will suggest to you the most accurate, closest address based on your location, which is again really, really useful for consumers in that e-commerce page. As you can imagine, there's kind of a few applications out there for what3words, simply because we work in essentially every industry that requires an accurate location, and that happens to be almost every one of them. So we work a lot with those who tell people about their what3words addresses, like travel partners. So the Platter's Wine Guide for the last 2 years has published the what3words addresses of all the visitable wine farms in South Africa, which was obviously my favorite project to work on ever. We've also worked with hotel groups so that they can put the 3-word addresses of where to find the exact front entrance and put it into your Uber as an example to find that spot. And then we also work with those who accept a what3words address. And here in South Africa, we've seen a large swathe of e-commerce and logistics providers accept a what3words address, integrate the technology so that they can use it for accurate last mile delivery. So everybody from logistics companies like DPD Laser, maybe Dawnwing, you know them as, to RTT, Dischem, Pickup, and a number of others who use that again for that accurate last mile. And then we even work actually with some governments around the world. So we are an accepted addressing standard in 8 countries around the world, including places like Mongolia and Tonga. I was talking about the Mercedes integration. We've also integrated into automotive partners so that you can voice navigate to a what3words address and say, hey, Mercedes, navigate me to Business Anchors Noisy. It will pin that on a map and then navigate you to that exact point. I mentioned the Platters Wine Guide. I think we all know wine farm addresses in this country are another story, and mostly you just have a road that you need to navigate to and you kind of hope and pray you're going to get there. Now you can actually find the 3-word address in the Platters Guide and navigate to that exact point using our app. Really, really helpful to find those places. We've also actually started working in the last about the last 12 months or so with emergency services in South Africa. And this has been a really, really interesting thing to see. We provide the technology for free to emergency services because we think it's a human right to be able to talk about your location in an emergency. And we've actually seen 10 emergency services across South Africa, both public and private sector, adopt the technology to rescue people in their time of greatest need using 3-word addresses. And we've actually had successful rescues in informal settlements as well, which has been incredible to see. So if this is a technology that can help ambulances and paramedics save a life in that last mile, we think there's a lot of application for getting your e-commerce Black Friday parcel delivered to you a little quicker. What we've done actually with emergency services was to introduce a completely new product. And this was piloted here in South Africa and has now been adopted globally. We call it the what3words Find Me site. And it does one thing very well, which is to tell you the exact 3 words of where you are at that moment. And this is actually how emergency services have integrated us in South Africa. If a person calls in and doesn't know where they are or can't describe their location, the services actually in the call center are enabled to send them an SMS with a link to the Find Me site. The person clicks it, sees the 3 words of where they are, relays them over the phone and says, I'm at Improving Drift Recall, and the services can then use that to navigate to that exact last mile. The really wonderful thing about the Find Me site is that we have actually had successful rescues with it. So this was Gauteng EMS, public sector emergency services in South Africa, responding to calls like this one in Soshanguve, which is the informal part of Soshanguve, just next to Mabopane. There are no street names, there is no street infrastructure, full stop. There are not even any landmarks where somebody could say, I'm next to the school, I'm opposite the church. And we managed in this case to rescue a woman who was having an epileptic fit. And her neighbors called it in and we managed to get to her within 20 minutes, as opposed to the usual 2 hours it takes to navigate the area simply because they can't talk about their location. As a result, we've also actually seen Vodacom zero rate the Find Me site in South Africa. And they've done this of their own volition because they also see the potential for literally saving lives with access to a piece of technology that is hyper light, but that people still don't necessarily have access to because data is still so expensive in this country. So they've actually zero rated the Find Me site as part of their Connect You platform, and that was announced earlier this year. And there's some very exciting news coming in the next 2 weeks about all the other mobile telcos in South Africa, but I won't give it away for now. So we also obviously have seen significant potential for optimizing the last mile. We work with emergency services, we work with travel companies, we work with automotive companies, but in South Africa, we've seen significant traction with e-commerce and logistics companies who've integrated the technology, primarily because we see South Africa as a bit of a Goldilocks market for logistics and e-commerce. We see that actually in places like Germany and the United States, logistics is so far advanced and addresses are by and large fine that actually nobody really has a problem getting a delivery in that last mile. And we see in places like Mongolia and Somalia that nobody's using navigation to actually get their parcels delivered. But South Africa is that beautiful happy medium where your courier guy does usually have some form of device. He really needs to get to you. He's trying to optimize his deliveries. He's got a lot going on, especially considering the significant increase in e-commerce that we've seen throughout lockdown. And he really needs to find you. He really needs to optimize his route. And so we've started working with lots of different partners across the spectrum. Dawnwing, we just launched last week, actually, DB Schenker, RTT, to make sure that they can receive a 3-word address from a retailer partner of theirs, convert that into a GPS coordinate, and then pin that on a map so their driver doesn't have to think about it and can just navigate to that exact last mile spot. DB Schenker, a logistics giant based out of Germany, but also here in South Africa, has integrated the technology, and this is actually their warehouse in Kempton Park. They like their what3words address so much, they put a giant sign up on the outside of their warehouse so that everybody can find them really easily. And they've also integrated us for that last mile response. But the reason we've seen so many of these e-commerce and logistics partners integrate us is because of the data. The data shows that actually delivering to what3words addresses by and large is much more efficient than delivering to a traditional address. We've actually run studies in multiple countries throughout the world. We ran one in the United Kingdom in London, which I think we can all agree probably has pretty solid addresses, pretty excellent postcodes, but we saw that using 3-word addresses compared to traditional addresses was actually 30% faster, even in central London. We replicated the same study in Dubai, and we saw that it was 42% faster to use what3words addresses. We also reduced the number of phone calls that the couriers had to make to the customer from 25 to 0. We just removed entirely the need for the courier to talk to the customer, which often actually brings in a lot of friction and a lot of potential for a possibly poor customer experience, simply because consumers don't know the difference between their e-commerce retailer and the courier partner. If I order something off Woolies' site, if it's Woolies that is going to deliver to me as a consumer, I don't actually expect there to be a third-party delivery person involved. If that delivery doesn't actually come through for whatever reason, you'll actually see the consumer blames the retailer. Even if it is possibly an error on the part of the logistics provider, it's something that the consumer doesn't put together. They don't put 2 and 2 together and go, actually, that was DHL's fault, or actually, that was FedEx's fault. They go, dang, Woolies, why didn't I get my delivery on time? So we've seen that there's a definitely a process and a trend where actually a logistics company is an extension of a retailer's brand. And there needs to be accountability in that front end for receiving accurate data and passing accurate data to the logistics company. So we actually replicated the study in South Africa, and we found that using what3words addresses was 44% more efficient than using traditional street addresses. And this is fundamentally because every single what3words address geocodes. And that's basically a fancy geography term for there is a GPS coordinate assigned to every single what3words address. And sometimes that isn't the case with a traditional address that's input onto a checkout page. Often, particularly if retailers are accepting addresses that are free text fields, somebody will put in an address that actually doesn't necessarily exist. Or we've often seen that people lie about where they live. So we've seen people type in things on an e-commerce checkout page to say, yes, I live in Sandton, but actually you live in Randburg Road. That's not the thing. So that's also going to create a lot of friction in that last mile and a lot of concern for the courier partner. So South Africa, we saw it was 44% faster because once you have those geocodes, once you have a coordinate for every single delivery on your trip sheet for the day, you can start to do some really intelligent things in the background with route optimization. You can start to take all of those coordinates and plot routes based on whatever efficiency you're trying to derive. So whether that's you want to reduce the amount of time that a courier is spending making those deliveries, if you're trying to optimize for traffic, if you're trying to optimize for the amount of petrol and the mileage the driver is using that day, there are multiple ways to obviously make that more efficient. But the minute you have a geocode, which every single what3words address provides, you can just be more efficient. You don't have couriers running around trying to figure out actually where they're going and optimizing in their own heads. So how we work with e-commerce providers, I mean, we enable logistics providers to receive a what3words address from an e-commerce retailer partner of theirs. They turn that into a coordinate and then the courier is on their way. But we need that 3-word address to come through from the e-commerce partner. And so how we work with e-commerce partners is that we enable essentially a field on their checkout page or their account page, or both in some cases. That means a customer can put in their what3words address if they know it. The retailers also usually do a communications campaign to let their customers know, hey, we can accept your what3words address now. It can be put into a field with auto-suggest enabled to capture any errors maybe and correct for those. A consumer places their order and that what3words address is passed through to the courier. So the what3words address is captured on that e-commerce checkout page and then passed all the way through. And we've actually seen a number of e-commerce companies in South Africa adopt the system already. We've been working with Dis-Chem for about the past year or so, and Dis-Chem on its e-commerce checkout page, which you'll see on the right-hand side of the screen, has integrated a what3words address field It's a non-mandatory field, and I want to be really clear about this because we don't want a what3words address to cause any friction on your checkout. We understand the pressure of getting a person to click continue to payment, pay that, and having it go through Handeli's team. We actually want that to happen as quickly as possible, and we don't want a what3words address to be a barrier to payment. And so if you don't know your 3-word address, crack on, and we'll tell you afterwards that you can find it and you can use it next time. Discount's also integrated in such a way that actually a what3words field isn't the only way to talk about the address. And I want to stress this quite a lot. In South Africa, we found that a what3words address is a really helpful, hyper-accurate postcode with words. It's not supposed to replace entirely a traditional address. But where you have a traditional address that's maybe not quite as accurate as it could be, your what3words address will almost be the final stamp of accuracy that you need, that the courier can then use to navigate to that exact last mile. We've seen iStore do the same thing. They were actually our first retail partner in South Africa. They integrated also a field on their checkout page and their account page, and even have a nifty little button so that people can go and find their what3words address if they want to. We've seen Zulzi do the same thing. I don't know if you know about Zulzi, but they're a brilliant on-demand grocery delivery service. Changed my life. I don't go to the shops anymore. I just get all of my Woolies, Dis-Chem, Pick and Pay shopping done by Zulzi. They drop it at exactly my 3-word address in Joburg, and I don't have to worry about it. They know exactly where they're going. And because they have that 1-hour delivery promise, it's even more important for their drivers to be really confident about their destination. And then, like I was saying, the retailers will help their customer base know about what3words. And so Dis-Chem, iStore, and all the other partners that we've had will say, hey, customers, this is how we're using what3words now. This is how you can find your 3-word address, pop it in on your next order, save it against your profile, and we can then find you without a problem and get your parcel to you. Obviously, really important for the upcoming Black Friday rush as well, considering how we've seen such significant numbers increase throughout lockdown. We think it'll be even more important to have that accurate last mile navigation. Zulzi's done the same thing by letting people know by email, social media, etc. Retail brands will have their best practice of how to engage their customer base. We work very closely with those brands' marketing teams. We know how to talk about what3words, but they will know how to engage their base. And so we work very well together to make sure that that happens. But this is just an example. I showed you that complex in Waterfall in just north of Joburg earlier. And actually, there are no street names in this giant complex, which is, significant and full of potential e-commerce customers. If you were to type the name of that complex, which is Waterfall Hills, into Google, Google would drop a pin at the front gate of that complex. And Google doesn't actually recognize any of the addresses, the house numbers in that complex. So the poor old courier would then be navigating to Waterfall Hills in Midrand. They would get to the front gate, and then they'd probably either have to go through all of the different streets there to try and find exactly where they need to go, or they would need to call the customer, which again creates friction because the courier is not built to be an extension of the retailer's brand necessarily. That said, if a person put in their what3words address, which in this case is Cave Starring Loans, they could differentiate an exact front door. The courier knows exactly where he's going. He can use navigation on his device to get to that point. There is no need for a phone call. It'll get to them quicker. And hopefully, we believe better delivery means a happier customer. So just to finalize how we work with logistics companies and e-commerce retailers, a customer will input a what3words address onto that checkout page. It gets sent as text to the courier partner. The couriers turn it into a coordinate, and then the couriers are on their way and get you your delivery. But very happy to hand over to Handeli because I'm very conscious I've been talking for a while now, but that's the fundamentals of how what3words works.
Thanks, Lynn. That was like really incredible. As I said before, I have a silent fascination with this because that something so simplistic can have such many uses. It's just incredible to me. So thank you so much for that. And thanks everyone for putting your 3 words into the chat box. It's really cool to see, so many of them coming through. Liam, it looks like you may be swimming. Yolanda, bottle, that's always a good one to have in your list. So we will do a bit of a lucky draw on these 3 words a bit later. But for now, Terry, can you pop up? We have one more poll to run quickly before we go into Q&A. If you can just take 2 minutes to Complete the poll, drop some questions in the chat box if you have questions for Lyndsey or myself. I'm sure it will be for Lyndsey. And or if you still need to add your 3 words that you can get into that lucky draw, I'll give you 2 minutes to just quickly do that while I just summarize. So firstly, Lyndsey, thanks again. I think this notion of the last mile is something that COVID, for me specifically during lockdown, really amplified. Because of the fact that I think a lot of the retailers managed to pivot quickly and change their operations to become e-commerce ready, but that we had a serious lag in the logistics and the delivery channel following suit. And I'm hoping that that now has picked up, and you see with a lot of the retailers doing the 1 hour options now in terms of shopping. Like, there definitely is an appreciation for the fact that people want to do online shopping. It needs to be accessible. It can't be 2 weeks delayed. It has to be immediate. So I'm really hoping that this will create jobs in our local environment, but also create some excellence using tools like what3words. So thank you very much for that. I see we have a few more coming through. So interestingly, this morning I did my 3 words. I put my Afrikaans ones in because I was so excited to hear about all the languages that I quickly downloaded the Afrikaans version. But my English one, when I was in the kitchen this morning, I quickly checked my kitchen address, and I think the universe is trying to send me a message, because my kitchen address is healthier eating rooster. So I reckon chicken and salad is on the menu for the rest of the year, thanks to what3words and the universe. But there are a few really other interesting ones. So in terms of like the poll, I'm going to just finish mine too, that we can get a poll results. Has everyone done their polls? All good. So Terry will put that up a bit later. Are there any questions? Oh, there you go. Fantastic. So a lot of people add logistics as part of the experience of the retailers, or the online shops, clearly, and people definitely struggle with couriers. So I think there's a lot that can be done around optimizing the delivery cycles. We have that problem consistently where I live. We're in a crescent, but in the middle of our crescent, there's an old age home that cuts the crescent in 2, and you can't drive through it. So if you enter the street from the wrong side, you can't get to my house. So we often have to redirect couriers around the block to come to our house. So and it still hasn't been updated on any of the traditional mapping sites. So on the traditional maps, you can drive through on that road, but practically you can't. So what we are going to do next, we're going to ask some questions. I saw that there was one question from Charles Lyndsey, who asked about whether or not the what3words addresses are recognized for Fika yet in South Africa, or what the plans would be if you know for that to happen.
Yeah, wonderful question. Thank you, Charles. The goal of what3words is very much to be the global standard of addressing. So are we there yet? No, but we have actually started with one of our partners looking at how what3words address could be used for RECA purposes. So as a best endeavor address, when you don't have a traditional address and you actually need one of those available to register for a SIM card. Once we have that process in place, and we're expecting that in about Q2 2021, I don't see any reason why we can't extend that to Fika. And this is such a critical part of, again, why people can't open bank accounts without an address. And it's such a barrier. And actually so many people in this country don't have access to that sort of financial inclusion just because of this. So it's very much part of the mission to make sure that that could be available to someone if they so choose. I think RECA will be the first step for us in that regard. And then, potentially the sky's the limit. Ideally, we would love to see this used for things like the census. We would love to see this used for, in the IEC's processes during elections, so that you can use your what3words address as a valid address so that you can actually participate in your own democracy. So 100%, Fika is very much, I think once we have RECA done, there'll be a lot of lessons that we can learn for financial legislation side of things and apply them there.
Oh, that's fantastic. I also see there's a question from Manfred asking around what's next for what3words. So what is on the radar, if you can spill the beans?
We have a big, hairy, audacious goal, a BHAG, as they call them, which is essentially to be the standard for addressing. And that's why we're trying so hard to get the system into every single major language around the world. I think we're about 55% of the way there. We think we'll be able to get the system into around 85 languages ultimately. We cover around 6 billion people in terms of language accessibility with the system. But what3words in South Africa, I think, has been a really interesting use case to prove the business model for e-commerce and logistics as it happens. And that's actually being replicated in other parts of the world now. We've just integrated with DHL in the UK. We've just integrated with Hermes, which is another big logistics provider there. We're speaking to Royal Mail and that sort of thing. South Africa is a really interesting case for us because it is such a dual market. For many years, I've been saying it's sort of two markets in one very much, because we do have the very developed world use case of, getting our Black Friday parcels delivered to us and wanting that to be a really accurate, optimized process. But we also still, as Charles was saying, have lots of people who actually don't necessarily have an address and can't open a bank account. And so we can actually almost service the entire population in that regard with a what3words address. So the goal is to be the way that people talk about addresses. We're called what3words because the idea was for if somebody hops into a taxi or somebody arrives at a hotel, instead of asking what's your address, they just say what3words. And so that's the goal. What3words, literally, we want to be the standard for addressing. It's about usage. It's about people knowing that they can use it. And it's about also crucially working with those partners who then tell other people. We're about a team of 120 globally. So people either think that's enormous for a scale up or tiny. We're a small team here in South Africa, but we think the potential is pretty significant. I mean, fundamentally, we're trying to replace a system that's basically been used for hundreds of years. Traditional addresses have been literally used for centuries and haven't actually ever changed in that time. We're working with postcodes in South Africa that are so large that they're actually almost meaningless. So the postcode of where I live in Joburg actually covers 7 different suburbs. And so there are repeated street names within those suburbs as well, if you think of how many streets or second avenues there are in the world. Again, it makes things really difficult. So we're basically trying to be that hyper accurate postcode and just get people to start using it and deploying it where they can.
No, that's really cool. It's a big hairy goal, but seeing where it started. So we have a few more interesting questions here. The one that I'm really keen to understand is whether you've ever counted how many squares there are in the world.
We have actually, yeah. So the system is a database. It's an algorithm, and it's a word list of words and a clever algorithm that intelligently sort of shuffles them all over the world once we have a new language available. There are 57 trillion squares in the world. So there are 57 trillion what3words addresses in English and all of the other languages as well. It means that if you're in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, you can still find actually words for that place. What we have done is taken the easiest to say and spell words and put them in the most populous places that speak that language. So as an example, the best Afrikaans words are going to be in South Africa for sure. The middle of the Australian outback is still addressed in Afrikaans. The words might just be slightly longer and a bit less common to use. And that logic has been applied for every single language. So the best French words are going to be in France, but also in places like Côte d'Ivoire, Cameroon, and other francophone African nations. The best Mongolian words are going to be in Mongolia, but the middle of Texas in the US is also still addressed in Mongolia. So we try to make it as sort of rational and kind of sensible and common sense as possible in terms of the words that we use for each of those places.
Oh, that's really cool. It just gives you a sense of how big languages are. If you could have like 3 unique words or iterations thereof in 57 trillion squares. So that is quite fascinating. There was another question to say whether when you translate it in other languages, can I take my English words like healthier eating, rooster, and translate it to Afrikaans and get the same location, or are they different? So do you need it in Afrikaans to have Afrikaans, or can you just make it whatever. Gezonder, eet en what is a rooster in Afrikaans? I can't even think. Just call it hoender for the lack of understanding. Also, do you need to have the Afrikaans version, or can you translate to another language?
So we've actually intentionally made it such that you can't just translate the words. And that's because of what I was saying about the easiest words to say and spell in each language are in that place. So as an example, table, apple, spoon in English won't be, the same square won't be tafel, appel, lepel in and Afrikaans. It's going to be a completely different space. That probably exists. Tafel will be somewhere, but it won't be the same block, simply because we want Afrikaans speakers to have the opportunity to use a nice, easy to say 3-word address like that. I think Table Apple Spoon is actually in Newcastle in the UK, which I don't think has that many Afrikaans, maybe more than I'm anticipating. But we want ideally people to be able to use the easiest words in the places that speak that language. And so every single square will have now 47 addresses for that particular square. So think of it like sort of a layer of just all the different addresses that will be for that one particular block, but they will still refer to the exact GPS coordinate of that block.
Cool. I mean, yeah, thanks. I think that's really useful. So there are two questions. One is on the list here from one of our guests, and the other one is from me. So you said I think 46 languages. So how many are you guys aiming for? What is next on the list for your language list?
We've actually just launched Amharic in Ethiopia, which I was really excited about because that's also a really interesting alphabet to play around with. And in Africa, we have Kenya, Rwanda, and Twi on the list. So Twi is spoken in West Africa and Ghana, and Kenya, Rwanda is obviously in Rwanda. We want to open up again as many of these countries as possible. We have things like Romanian and Bulgarian that are coming soon as well. We launched recently also in Chinese, which happened to be a lot more complicated than anybody kind of thought, simply because in terms of how you write a Chinese 3-word address, firstly, they don't recognize words in the Chinese language. And then they also have a simplified version of Chinese and a traditional version of Chinese, which have completely different alphabets as well. So that was a huge challenge, but we do actually have a languages team that sits full-time in our London office, and they get to geek out every day and find the best words and draft these lists, and also actually work with local language speakers in the places that speak that language to draft that list. So it's not like it's a bunch of people in the UK that are just choosing what they think are the best words. There's actually an incredibly crafted process to make sure that we are taking the most optimized, the most positively connotated words in every language by dealing very closely with people who speak it. So actually we had, I think, 50 language consultants for Afrikaans, Zulu, and Xhosa, obviously completely different people who helped us draft those lists. The Afrikaans word list, I would really highly recommend you take a look because it's so uniquely Afrikaans and uniquely South African. There are words like rooibos and boerewors in melktert, and like it's just phenomenal, and you just can't necessarily translate that into another language. And so it makes it kind of uniquely South African. We wanted to reflect those local populations as much as possible. But ideally, I think, we're looking, the sky is theoretically the limit, but we think we will reach the majority of the world's population by the time we hit 80 to 85 languages. So there are more that are coming on board. We're even looking at Aboriginal languages in Australia and others to see if we can include, enhance that inclusion in those parts of the world too.
Well, that's really cool. Then one of the questions from one of our guests is, and this obviously is very important considering our business, is we know the countdown to Black Friday has begun. If any of our clients would like to, get this last mile optimization, is there time? How long does it take? How difficult is it? Do you need to be a techie to get it done? And what is the process to be able to do that?
Yeah, 100%. There is time. There is always time. We work very, very quickly. But in terms of integrating as a retailer, if you wanted to integrate a what3words field on your checkout, your account page, we've made it incredibly simple to integrate, and we've done that intentionally. So most developers do it within 30 to 45 minutes. It doesn't require a weekly sprint. It doesn't require an enormous amount of dev resource, and we've done that very intentionally. And then we can enable you to just call the API, turn that into a coordinate, and you can either pass the what3words address on to the logistics partner, or you can pass on the coordinates if the logistics partner can't necessarily deliver to a what3words address yet. We also actually have a brand new tool that we've just launched with Lightstone Property. Lightstone has one of the best private databases of addresses in South Africa, just superb data quality. And what we've actually built with them is a tool that turns a what3words address into a traditional address based on the land parcel, the earth that actually exists for that point using the GPS coordinate, which means that as a consumer on a checkout page, if I wanted to only have one field available to me where I could put in my what3words address once I found it, say Gently website baseline, I could put that in, click the what3words address, and it will automatically display my traditional address. with the suburb, the postcode, the city, etc. All of that validated because Lightstone has checked that and they've made sure that that's a valid, accurate address in that last mile. So that has the effect of actually speeding up checkout, which we think is really exciting. And we've seen this sort of thing adopted in the UK and the US quite strongly. And we think that's the next trend for South African retailers, is trying to really shave off as many seconds and sort of microseconds as possible on that checkout experience so that somebody can really quickly press that crucial purchase, buy, pay button and get their delivery when they need it.
No, that's excellent. Thank you very much, Linz. I'm going to see if there are any more questions here from the team. Firstly, has everyone put their 3 words in that we can do the draw for like the coolest what 3 words? I was going to actually try and see whoever came closest to my kitchen address, but then I saw Nazreen, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, Nazreen Ibrahim, said that she hasn't checked her 3 words yet, but her 3 words, like her personal ones, I'm assuming, would be 5 things grateful. And I think that was really creative. So Nazreen, you are going to be the lucky winner of our parcel. Shani will get in contact with you. So thank you very much for that. And in fact, this is exactly what we did as a team when we had our sessions around the power of 3. We all had to find 3 words that uniquely described ourselves, ideally quite creatively. So not mom, businesswoman, wife, but like funky words like mom would be taxi and, you know, whatever. So that's why mine are puzzle, chameleon, and kitchen. They all have very distinct meaning to me. So what we then did is we took our 3 words and plotted it into what 3 words to see where we ended up in the world, if anyway. And it was fascinating to see how many people were in Australia. Funnily enough, there was something really weird that there was a lot of Australian, and then quite a lot of people were somewhere in the ocean. So you can take your 3 words that you've picked, Nazreen, for yourself and put it into the What 3 Words app later and see where that takes you. It would be quite interesting to see. But Shani will get in contact with you. I'll see if there are any other questions. If not, I'm going to say thank you very much, Lyndsey. I don't see any other questions, but thank you so much for being in contact. We will share your contact details as well with our clients. They can get in contact with you with regards to optimization of their checkout experience. Thank you very much, Andre and Terry, for your continued support. We really appreciate you being part of this business by her family. And then Shani, thanks again for arranging, as always, doing all of the logistics, the internal logistics. That's so important. And she will send out reminders in terms of where you can find the recording if you want to share it with anyone that you think can do with this information, either pre-Black Friday or just in general. We know a lot of people are looking at online businesses, so always best to start with the end goal in mind. So if you can optimize from the word go, I think that'll be fantastic. But Shani will send you the details of how you can contact Lyndsey and her team, of some of the key lessons we learned on today's session. And then when we'll have the next one, hopefully we'll have the next one sometime soon. But until then, good luck for the Black Friday prep. Have a lovely weekend wherever you are. If in Cape Town, stay warm. Make sure you've got red wine and a fire going for the rainy weekend. And we'll chat soon. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a lovely day.